This is definitely the last video, at least for now, about dealing with frustration and disappointment. In the first part, we looked at the circle of control, spending your time focusing on things that you can change rather than things that you have no control over. In the second part, we looked at changing the frame size. It can be very easy to look at a day in isolation and think, I didn't achieve anything, I never seem to achieve anything in my life. But when you widen the frame size and you look at that in the context of what might be a great month, then it's a lot easier to see just how much you did achieve and to give yourself credit for that. And then last time we talked about setting the correct expectations. If you set your expectations so high that they can never be met, then you're just setting yourself up for a life of frustration and disappointment. As promised, I'm going to share with you a very simple idea that was given to me by someone who's very successful, yet wasn't always as successful. And I'm just going to start by talking about a very simple idea called reframing. And you might have heard this word before. It's very simple. All it means is changing the way that we look at things. And the classic example of a reframe is don't talk about problems, talk about opportunities. But when we change the way that we look at things, we change our psychological response to them. So back to Pete. And one day Pete said to me, Tony, the day when I started to become really successful was the day when I learned how to change frustration into fascination. And overnight, I stopped being frustrated when people didn't do what they said they were going to do. And I started to become fascinated by the sheer number of excuses that people can come up with. And I started being fascinated by the lengths that people will go to in order to not be straight and give you a simple answer. And I started to be fascinated when people were in a bad mood. What could be going on in their life that's causing them to behave in this way? And as I became more fascinated, I became less frustrated. And as I became less frustrated, I left more room in my life to be successful. Is it really that simple though? And actually, yes, it is. If you allow yourself to get frustrated when you're waiting really patiently for a parking space and someone jumps in front of you at the last minute, then long after they've gone and forgotten that you even exist, that'll still be spoiling your day. And Confucius said, holding on to anger is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. And there's only a very small amount of difference between frustration and anger. So when that person jumps into that parking space in front of you, start to become fascinated by what could be going on in their life that is so important that they need to behave in a sociably unacceptable way. Instead of focusing on what you can't change, the fact that they're in that parking space, think about what can you change when you can go and find somewhere else to park. And yes, that might be incredibly inconvenient and it might even mean that you're going to be late for a meeting. But change that frame size because 6-7 hours from now, you'll have found somewhere else to park. You'll have been to your meeting and you'll be at home and you'll have completely forgotten that moment ever existed. And then just start thinking about all the great things that are going on in your life right now and it will change your perception of the whole experience. So it is simple, but is it easy? And the answer is obviously no. And if I give you the impression that it is, or if I give you the impression that I never get frustrated by anything, then I apologise because I've misled you. But now you have some simple strategies and techniques and attitudes that you can use. And the more that you use them, the easier they become. And the more that you use them, the more they become habits. Once you start to focus on what you can control most of the time, and you start to choose a realistic frame size most of the time, and you choose to set your standards appropriately high most of the time, and then most of the time you're able to change frustration into fascination, your life will become better and more enjoyable. And who knows, maybe like Pete, you'll also leave some space for success to move in. Now it's time to go away and play with these ideas. And notice that I use the word play because we don't need to be serious when we're thinking about stuff like this. And actually, very often it can be great to adopt an attitude of playful curiosity. And once you have played with them for a bit, come back and watch this series again because you will start to notice a deeper message second and third time that you watch them.